The silence of Terra is the loudest sound in the galaxy. I stand where the Imperial Palace once scraped the sky, where the Golden Throne held the Emperor's rotting corpse, where humanity made its final stand and lost. The ground beneath my feet is glass now, fused by psychic fire so hot it turned bone and stone into a single smooth surface that reflects the bruised purple sky. Somewhere beneath this crystalline grave lie 10 billion corpses and the ashes of a dream that almost convinced the stars themselves. The wind here carries no dust because there is nothing left to crumble. When Horus struck the final blow and the Emperor's light went out forever, the warp storms came like a tide of razors and screaming mouths. They ate the planet's surface down to the bedrock in some places, and in others they changed the very laws of physics until up meant hungry and down meant bleeding. I am Kysaduras the Wandering, a solitaire of the Harlequins, and I have walked alone for 10,000 years through the aftermath of humanity's extinction. My mask shows a weeping skull split down the middle, half laughing and half screaming, because that is what truth looks like when you stare at it long enough. I came to Terra following a thread of old stories, whispers in the webway about a vault that survived the fall, about crystals that held the last thoughts of those who died here. What I found instead was the gravestone of the Cabal's great gamble, and carved on that stone in letters made of absence and regret is a message that will haunt me until she who thirsts finally claims my soul. The Cabal thought they were so clever. The Eldar members, especially, older than empires and twice as arrogant, convinced that their calculations could predict the death throes of chaos itself. I remember the stories passed down through the Black Library's forbidden archives, tales of how they approached the Primarchs with their prophecy like priests bringing scripture to savages. They showed Alfarius and Omegan two paths through the skein of possibility, two futures branching from a single moment of choice. In one future, Horus loses at Terra. The Emperor endures, broken but breathing, locked in his golden throne for 10,000 years, while his Imperium rots from within. Humanity spreads across the galaxy like a plague of suffering, every human soul a feast for the dark gods, every prayer and murder and moment of despair feeding the ruinous powers until they grow fat enough to devour reality itself. In that future, chaos wins slowly, inevitable as entropy, grinding down the galaxy one screaming soul at a time. But in the second future, the one the Cabal championed with the fervor of converts, Horus wins. He kills the Emperor. He shatters the Imperium in a paroxysm of betrayal so absolute that humanity tears itself apart within a single generation. And then, with humanity gone, with that vast reservoir of souls and suffering finally emptied, chaos would starve. Without the emotions of mankind to feed them, the four would weaken, diminish, eventually fade into the background radiation of the warp. The galaxy would know peace. The Eldar could rebuild. The Tau could spread. Even the Orcs might settle into something less catastrophic. All it would cost was humanity's complete annihilation, and the Cabal decided that was a fair price to pay for everyone else's survival. They convinced themselves they had found the trolley problem to end all trolley problems, and they pulled the lever with the certainty of philosophers who had never stood on the tracks. Horus won, the Emperor died, and the Cabal's certainty died with him, because chaos did not starve. I have spent 10 millennia watching what actually happened, and the horror of it is so much worse than simple miscalculation. It is the horror of realizing that the patient you vivisected to study disease was actually the only thing keeping the plague contained. When the last human strongholds fell and the species went extinct within 3 centuries of Terra's fall, the Chaos Gods did not weaken. They adapted. They turned their infinite hunger toward the species that remained, and they fed differently but no less gluttonously. The Orcs, already touched by their own savage gods, became a feast of violence so pure and unending that corn grew 3 times larger in the warp's impossible geography. Without humanity's desperate wars and last stands, without that peculiar human mixture of courage and terror, Orc conflict became the new standard for the blood god's sustenance. The greenskins fight like they breathe, constant and thoughtless. And in the absence of humanity's organized resistance, they spread across the galaxy like spores in a dead forest. I have walked through the ruins of Maiden Worlds where Orcs built fortress cities on top of Wraithbone spires, where they used Eldar soul stones as decorative trinkets on their banners. The laughter that echoes from those places is not human anymore, but it feeds something in the warp just the same. The Tau, young and idealistic and so sure their greater good would save them where humanity failed, learned what ambition truly costs when Tzeentch turned his full attention to their expanding empire. Without humanity's Imperium grinding against the borders of Tau space, without the eternal distraction of human treachery and human hope and human desperation, the changer of ways focused on the next best source of plots and plans and schemes. I have seen Tau ethereals go mad from visions they cannot unsee. Entire septs corrupted not through violence but through whispered promises of faster expansion, better technology, a shortcut to the utopia they claim to seek. The Tau call it the fracture, when half their empire turned traitor in a single night because Tzeentch showed them a version of the greater good that required only a few compromises, only a little darkness in service of the greater light. They are still fighting themselves 7,000 years later, and the war produces enough desperate hope and shattered idealism to keep the architect of fate fed for eternity. The Tau thought they could avoid humanity's mistakes by being rational, by eschewing superstition and embracing pragmatism. They learned that chaos does not care about your philosophy when your philosophy involves wanting things you do not have. Desire is desire, whether it wears an imperial aquila or the sigil of the greater good. And the Necrons, ancient beyond reckoning and bitter beyond words, discovered that hatred is an emotion too. Slaanesh found that out first, testing the boundaries of what consciousness trapped in living metal could feel. But it was Nurgle who truly feasted on the tomb worlds. Despair, it turns out, is not limited to flesh. When you have lived 60 million years and watched your empire crumble twice, when you have slept through the death of the Old Ones and the birth of the Eldar and the rise and fall of humanity, and you wake to find the galaxy still full of suffering and you are still trapped in a body that cannot die, that despair runs deeper than any plague. I have witnessed Necron overlords succumb to entropy cults, their legions standing down in the middle of battles because their leaders simply stopped caring. I have seen tomb complexes where the Necrons carved prayers to the Plague Father into their own chests, begging for the gift of mortality, for rot to finally claim what the biotransference made eternal. Nurgle does not need flesh to spread his garden. He needs the exhaustion of immortals who realize infinity is not a blessing. The Silent King himself went missing 4,000 years ago, and the rumors in the webway say he walked into the Eye of Terra voluntarily, seeking an ending his people's technology could never provide. The Eldar, my own people, the ones who smugly served on the Cabal and convinced themselves they were saving the galaxy, they learned the hardest lesson of all. We did not escape. We thought with humanity gone, Slaanesh would have no new souls to claim, that she who thirsts might focus elsewhere and give us breathing room to rebuild. We were fools. The birth of Slaanesh came from Eldar excess, and our extinction will come from Eldar despair. Without humanity's Imperium to fight against, without the drama of human heroes and human tragedies to entertain us, the Eldar civilization collapsed inward like a star going supernova in reverse. The craft worlds turned on each other first, old grievances magnified by the absence of external threats. Then the Comorites in the webway, sensing weakness, began raiding not just for slaves but for sport, because what else is there to do in eternity except find new ways to feel something? I have watched craft worlds go silent, their infinity circuits cracked and leaking souls directly into Slaanesh's maw because there was no one left to maintain them. I have seen Farseers claw their own eyes out rather than look one more second into futures that all end the same way. The Eldar population is 1/10 of what it was when humanity fell, and falling faster every century. We are dying of ennui and arrogance, and the sudden realization that we were never the protagonists of this story. We were the chorus, and the hero we mocked is dead. I walk across Terra's glass surface and feel the emptiness like a physical weight. There are daemon worlds now, dozens of them scattered across the former Imperium, planets where the warp and real space have merged so completely that the laws of reality are suggestions at best. But Terra is different. Terra is silent. The Chaos Gods claimed this world the moment Horus killed the Emperor, but they did not transform it into a screaming playground of excess and violence. They left it almost untouched, a monument to their victory, and that restraint is more terrifying than any torture dimension they could have created. The silence says, "We won. We do not need to gloat. We do not need to desecrate this grave because the death itself is desecration enough." I have been to worlds where Khorne's rage makes the air bleed, and planets where Tzeentch's scheming has turned every stone into a different color, every second, and moons where Nurgle's love has made trees out of intestines, and flowers out of tumors. But Terra is just quiet glass and purple sky, and the memory of a species that almost mattered. The vault I seek is not on the surface. It cannot be, because the surface belongs to the warp now, and anything physical would have been scoured away in the first days after the Emperor's death. I descend through a crack in the glass, following a path that I can only perceive through the webway senses unique to my kind. The Harlequins walk between spaces, and there is a space here beneath the world's skin where reality persists by sheer stubbornness. The tunnel is lined with wraithbone, which makes no sense because wraithbone is Eldar technology and should not exist on ancient Terra. But then I see the inscriptions and I understand. These are not Eldar runes. They are human letters, high Gothic, but written in a style that predates the Imperium itself. Someone from the dark age of technology made this vault and clad it in wraithbone stolen or traded from Eldar who died before the fall. Someone knew this day would come and prepared a message for whoever would listen 10,000 years later. The tunnel descends for what feels like miles, though distance means little in places like this. I pass through chambers that hold nothing but shadows and echoes. I pass through halls where the walls whisper in languages that died before the age of strife. And finally, at the bottom of everything, in a room no larger than a servitor's cell, I find what I came for. The crystals are arranged in a circle on a pedestal of black stone. Each one is the size of a human thumb, clear as diamond, and glowing faintly with a light that does not come from any physical source. Memory crystals, psychically imprinted with the final thoughts of those who held them. This is Eldar technology again, or at least inspired by it, and the implications make my mind reel. Humanity was not supposed to have this capability. The Imperium banned psychic research outside the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, and even they never developed anything like this. But these crystals predate the Imperium. They come from the time when humanity reached for the stars with hope instead of fear, before Old Night, before the Emperor revealed himself, before the Chaos Gods learned to pronounce the word Terra. Someone from that golden age made these and filled them with knowledge, and hid them here, waiting. I reach out with my mind and touch the first crystal, and the universe inverts. I am standing on Terra during the siege. I am Malkador, the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, the only baseline human who ever understood what the Master of Mankind was truly attempting. I am dying. My body is dust held together by sheer will, my psyker abilities burning through my cells faster than they can regenerate. I am holding the Golden Throne stable while the Emperor fights Horus on the vengeful spirit, and I know I will not survive to see the outcome. But I am not afraid. I am recording this memory into a crystal given to me by the Emperor himself, a device he found in the ruins beneath the Himalayan mountains, a relic of the civilization humanity built before we fell. He told me to record the truth, because someone needs to remember what he actually tried to do. The Emperor was many things, most of them terrible, but he was not a fool. He knew the Cabal's prophecy. One of his agents intercepted Alpharius before the Alpha Legion turned, and the Emperor learned everything. He knew the Cabal believed Horus's victory would starve chaos, and he knew they were wrong. Malkador's memory shows me something I never knew, something the Black Library's archives never recorded. The Emperor ran the calculations himself, using psychic foresight that made the Eldar Farseers look like children reading tea leaves. He looked at every possible future, every branching path, and he saw what the Cabal could not. Chaos does not need humanity. Chaos needs suffering, and the galaxy has never lacked for suffering. The Four are not parasites dependent on a single host. They are apex predators, and humanity is simply the largest prey animal. Remove humanity and they will feed on whoever remains, and they will adapt their appetites to match the new food source. The Orcs will feed Khorne, the Tau will feed Tzeentch, the Necrons will feed Nurgle. The Eldar will continue feeding Slaanesh until the last one of us is devoured. Nothing changes except the flavor of the screaming. The Emperor knew this, and he made a choice that the Cabal never considered, because it required a level of cruelty that even the most ancient Eldar could not fathom. If chaos would feed on the galaxy regardless, then the only winning move was to make humanity so bitter and terrible a meal that the dark gods would choke on us forever. The Imperium was not designed to defeat chaos. It was designed to distract chaos. Every aspect of the Imperium's grimdark horror, every senseless cruelty and grinding oppression and absurd waste of human life, all of it was intentional. The Emperor built a civilization that would produce the maximum possible amount of suffering while still maintaining just enough cohesion to survive. He created a species-wide agony engine that would keep the Force so focused on consuming humanity that they would not have the attention or resources to fully corrupt everyone else. He made humanity the shield, not a shield that protects by blocking blows, but a shield that protects by being so covered in spikes and poison that the enemy fixates on it instead of looking for easier targets. The Imperium's endless wars were not failures of diplomacy or necessary evils. They were bait. The ecclesiarchy's fanaticism was not a corruption of the imperial truth. It was a factory for producing the kind of desperate faith that chaos finds irresistible. The Inquisition's paranoia, the Administratum's inefficiency, the Astra Militarum's meat grinder tactics, the Adeptus Mechanicus's stagnation, all of it was part of the design. Make humanity suffer so much that we become the galaxy's largest psychic beacon, a dinner bell ringing in the warp so loud that everything else looks like table scraps. Malcador's final thought, imprinted in the crystal as his body collapsed to dust, was this: they will call him a tyrant and a monster, and they will be right. But they will never know he was also their savior, because the only way to save them was to damn us. The memory ends and I am back in the vault, shaking so hard that my mask almost falls off. I reach for the second crystal, and the third, and the fourth, moving through them faster now because I need to know if this is real or some final delusion of a dying psyker. Each crystal holds a different perspective, a different voice, but they all tell the same story. A custodian guard who stood watch over the imperial palace for 1,000 years and slowly came to understand why the emperor designed the Imperium to be inefficient, why he allowed corruption and stagnation and suffering to fester, because a healthy humanity would defeat chaos too quickly, and then the four would move on to other prey. A remembrancer from the Great Crusade who documented a private conversation between the emperor and one of the lost primarchs, the one who questioned why they could not build a better civilization, and the emperor's response was a single sentence: because better would be faster, and faster would be worse for everyone else. A Mechanicum adept who found schematics in the emperor's personal forges, plans for technologies that could have revolutionized the Imperium, devices that would have made faster than light travel safer and psychic communication reliable and agricultural production efficient enough to end hunger on 10,000 worlds. The schematics were labeled "Do Not Build" in the Emperor's own hand, and the adept spent 50 years trying to understand why, before the answer came to her in a flash of horrified clarity. Efficiency would mean fewer deaths. Fewer deaths would mean less suffering. Less suffering would mean chaos would finish with humanity sooner and move on to everyone else with their full attention. The Imperium had to be inefficient. It had to devour its own children in the slowest, most agonizing way possible, because every extra century of human suffering was another century the Eldar and Tau and every other species had to prepare or hide or simply exist without the Four's undivided malice. The Emperor built a civilization designed to fail slowly, and he told no one because if anyone knew the truth, they might try to fix it. I go through a dozen more crystals and the pattern holds. Every single one is a fragment of understanding from someone who glimpsed the Emperor's true plan and was horrified by it. None of them are from the Emperor himself, because of course they are not. He would never be so sentimental as to justify himself, even to an audience 10,000 years dead. But his allies and servants and enemies, the ones who got close enough to see behind the mask, they left their testimonies here in this vault beneath Terra's corpse. And the final crystal, the largest one, glowing brighter than all the others, that one is not a memory at all. It is a message. I touch it and hear the Emperor's voice, not filtered through psychic resonance or wrapped in the golden light of his projected image, But the actual voice of the man who became a god, he sounds tired. He sounds older than time. And he sounds sorry. If you are hearing this, then Horus has won, and humanity is extinct. Good. That was always the better outcome, though the Cabal will never understand why. I am not a good man. I have never pretended to be. But I am a practical one, and practicality required me to build hell on purpose. The ruinous powers are inevitable. They are woven into the fabric of consciousness itself, born from the emotions of every sentient species in the galaxy. You cannot kill them. You cannot starve them. You can only distract them. Humanity is the largest concentration of psychic souls in the galaxy, and I made sure we stayed that way by encouraging our own suffering. Every war, every purge, every pointless death that the Imperium inflicts on itself is another moment the Four spend feeding on us instead of looking elsewhere. I know what the Cabal told the Primarchs. I know they believed Horus's victory would lead to chaos starvation. They are wrong. Chaos does not need us, but chaos wants us, because we are the richest source of the emotions they crave. And as long as we can keep their attention, the rest of the galaxy has a chance. The message continues, and I can barely stand to listen. The Imperium is a sacrifice. Every human born into it is a sacrifice, and they do not know and cannot know, because if they knew they would rebel and the whole edifice would collapse. I have damned my species to 10,000 years of agony so that yours might survive. When I am gone, the Imperium will rot from the inside, and that rot is essential. It must be cruel enough to produce suffering, but not so cruel that it collapses immediately. It must be inefficient enough to prolong the agony, but not so inefficient that humanity goes extinct too quickly. The balance is everything, and if I have calculated correctly, if the throne holds and the Imperium endures, then by the time humanity finally falls, the other species of the galaxy will have had 10 millennia to prepare for the moment when chaos turns its full attention toward them. 10,000 years is not enough to defeat the dark gods, but it is enough to build defenses, to find new weapons, to spread so far across the stars that no single cataclysm can wipe you all out at once. Humanity is buying you time with our suffering. You are welcome. The message does not end with those words, though I wish it did. Instead, the Emperor's voice drops to something almost like a whisper, and he says, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking this is monstrous. You are thinking no rational species would agree to this bargain. You are right on both counts, but I am not asking for your agreement. I am telling you what I have already done, because it is too late to undo it. The Imperium is already built. The Chaos Gods are already fixated on humanity. The sacrifice has already been made. All that remains is to see if it was enough. If you are hearing this, then it was not enough, because Horus has won and humanity is gone. And if humanity is gone but you still live, then perhaps the sacrifice meant something after all. Or perhaps chaos will devour you all within a generation, and this entire plan will be revealed as the arrogant delusion of a man who thought he could outthink the fundamental forces of entropy and malice. Either way, I will be dead, and it will not matter to me. But if there is any justice in this universe, any pattern to the chaos, then someone will remember that we tried. Someone will remember that humanity suffered so that others might not have to. And maybe, just maybe, that memory will be enough to convince the next species that faces extinction that sacrifice is not always noble, but it is sometimes necessary. The message ends. The crystal goes dark. I stand in the vault for a long time, trying to process what I have learned, trying to fit this revelation into the framework of everything I thought I knew about the Imperium and the Emperor and the nature of the war between chaos and reality. And slowly, like ice melting into understanding, I realize the Emperor was right. Not morally right, because there is no morality in damning your own species to eternal suffering, but strategically right, practically right, the only option available right. When humanity fell, when Horus killed the Emperor and the Imperium shattered and the species went extinct within 3 centuries, the Chaos Gods did not weaken, but they did not immediately overwhelm everyone else either. For the first 1,000 years after humanity's extinction, the Four were still gorging themselves on the aftershocks, the psychic echoes of a billion worlds screaming in unison as they died. That gave the Eldar time to retreat deeper into the webway and shore up our defenses. That gave the Tau time to fortify their core worlds and develop the technologies that let them survive the fracture when it came. That gave the Necrons time to wake more tomb worlds and organize a response to the Daemon incursions that would have overwhelmed them if they had come immediately. Humanity's extinction was not instant. It took 3 centuries of grinding civil war and slow collapse. And every year of that slow death was another year the rest of the galaxy was not under full assault. The Emperor's plan worked in a twisted, horrible, utterly ruthless way. He could not save his own species, but he bought time for everyone else, and no one knew, no one understood. The Cabal thought they were being clever by engineering humanity's fall. The Eldar thought they were escaping chaos by removing the species that fed it most. The Tau thought they were inheriting a galaxy cleansed of the Imperium's madness. We were all wrong. Humanity was not the problem. Humanity was the solution, or at least the best solution the Emperor could devise with the information and resources available to him. And now they are gone, and the galaxy is learning the hard way that chaos does not need humanity. It just enjoyed humanity, the way a gourmand enjoys a particularly rich meal. Now the 4 are eating lighter fare, and they are eating all of us, and there is no shield left to hide behind. I gather the crystals, all of them, and place them in a stasis container I brought for this exact purpose. These are not artifacts to be studied or displayed. They are confessions, and confessions belong in the Black Library where the laughing God's chosen can decide what to do with them. But I know what I will recommend. I will recommend they be hidden forever, because the truth they contain is too dangerous to spread. If the surviving species of the galaxy learn that the Emperor of mankind deliberately engineered his civilization to suffer so that others would not have to, it will break something fundamental in the way we think about survival and sacrifice, and the price of existence. The Eldar will either worship him as the greatest martyr in galactic history, or despise him as the cruelest tyrant ever born, and neither response will help us survive the long war we are now fighting against chaos without humanity's distraction. The Tau will lose faith in the greater good, because how can you believe in collective utopia when the largest collective in the galaxy chose collective damnation instead? The Orcs will not care, because Orcs do not think about things like this, but even they might pause in their endless fighting if they understood that someone once built an entire civilization as a deliberate sacrifice. I leave the vault the way I came, climbing back through the Wraithbone tunnel to Terra's glassy surface. The purple sky has darkened to something closer to black, and the stars are visible now, more stars than Terra's original sky ever held, because the warp has made astronomy into abstract art. I can see the eye of Terra from here, a vast wound in reality that has been growing slowly for 10,000 years. It will consume the galaxy eventually. Everyone knows this. The only question is how long eventually takes, and whether any species will survive long enough to find an answer that does not involve extinction or eternal servitude to the dark gods. Humanity gave us 10,000 years. The Emperor's plan, as monstrous as it was, bought the galaxy 10 millennia to prepare for the end. We have not used that time wisely. The Eldar are dying. The Tau are fracturing. The Necrons are succumbing to despair. The Orcs are thriving. But Orcs thriving is not a solution to anything except the question of how much violence a single galaxy can contain before it collapses under its own weight. I think about the Emperor's final words in that message. Someone will remember that humanity suffered so that others might not have to. I am that someone now, whether I want to be or not, and the weight of that memory is crushing, because it means acknowledging that everything the Imperium did, every cruelty and excess and senseless waste of life, was not madness, it was strategy. It was the only strategy available to a species that looked at the Chaos Gods and realized they could not win, but they could delay the loss long enough for others to escape. The Imperium of Man was not a civilization. It was a rearguard action stretched across 10,000 years and 1,000,000 worlds. And it failed when Horus won at Terra, but it failed in a way that still accomplished its goal. Humanity went extinct. Chaos fed on that extinction for 1,000 years. And the rest of us survived long enough to understand what had been sacrificed on our behalf. I start walking toward the nearest webway gate, which is 17 miles north of the Imperial Palace's ruins. The glass surface makes for easy travel, perfectly smooth and unbroken, except where demon manifestations have left scorch marks that smell like burning copper and rotting flowers. I pass through a section where the glass is stained red, and I realize this is where the Blood Angels made their last stand during the siege. I pass through a section where the glass is cracked in geometric patterns, and I know this is where the Thousand Suns unleashed sorcery so powerful it tried to turn Terra itself into a scroll of forbidden knowledge. Every step I take is across history, across the compressed suffering of an entire species making its final argument for existence. And they lost. They lost because one of their own sons betrayed them, because the Chaos Gods found a wedge and hammered it home, because the universe is fundamentally hostile to order and meaning and hope. But they lost slowly enough that their loss mattered. The webway gate is overgrown with something that looks like vines but pulses like veins, and I have to cut through it with my Harlequin's kiss before I can activate the gate. The blood that spills from the vines is human, impossibly, because there are no humans left to bleed. But Terra is a demon world now, and demon worlds do not care about impossibility. The gate opens with a sound like singing, and I step through into the webway, leaving Terra and its silent grave behind. The webway feels different now, more fragile than it did 10,000 years ago, as if the walls between the tunnels and the warp are wearing thin. I can hear scratching on the other side of the walls, whispers in languages that make my mask itch against my skin, promises of things I do not want, and threats I have already survived. The webway was never completely safe, but it used to be safer than this. Without humanity's Imperium grinding against chaos day and night, the Four have more resources to throw at undermining the webway, and it shows in every flickering light and unstable passage. I travel for what might be days, or might be minutes, because time in the webway is a suggestion, until I reach the entrance to the Black Library. The library's gates recognize me immediately, the runes on my soul marking me as one who has walked the path of the solitaire, one who has given up hope of reincarnation because I have gazed too long into the face of she who thirsts. The gates open without sound, and I enter the most sacred and most forbidden place in the Eldar's scattered civilization. The Black Library is not a building. It is a space between spaces, a pocket dimension where knowledge too dangerous to exist anywhere else is stored under the watchful eye of the laughing god. The shelves stretch into infinity in all directions, and on those shelves are the memories of civilizations that fell before the Eldar were born, the true names of demons that could unmake reality if spoken aloud, the forbidden technologies of the old ones, and the final confessions of those who understood too much. I add the crystals from Terra to a shelf reserved for human artifacts, placing them next to a data slate that contains the Emperor's original notes on the Primarch project, and a piece of the Golden Throne that still hums with residual psychic energy. The Shadowseer who oversees this section of the library approaches me with the grace of someone who has forgotten what urgency feels like. Her mask is blank except for a single tear made of silver, and her voice sounds like wind through empty corridors when she asks what I have brought. I tell her. I explain everything the crystals contained, every revelation about the Emperor's true plan, every horrible detail of how the Imperium was designed to suffer on purpose. She listens without interrupting, and when I finish she stands silent for a long moment before saying, "The Cabal will never forgive us for this. If they learn the truth, that humanity's extinction was exactly what the Emperor wanted, because it meant chaos would fixate on consuming the corpse instead of hunting fresh prey, it will destroy the last shred of moral authority the Eldar claim over the younger species." I nod, because she is right. The Eldar have spent 10,000 years telling ourselves we are the Elder race, the wise ones, the species that survived the fall and learned from it. If it becomes known that we engineered humanity's extinction based on a misunderstanding of how chaos operates, and that the Emperor knew we were wrong but said nothing because our arrogance served his purposes, it will be the final nail in the coffin of Eldar pride. The Shadowseer places one hand on the shelf where the crystals now rest, and her voice drops to something almost inaudible when she says, "Do you think he knew? The Emperor, I mean. Do you think he knew Horus would win?" I have thought about this question for the entire journey back from Terra, and I still do not have a good answer. I think he knew it was possible, I say slowly, choosing my words with care. I think he looked at the probabilities and saw that chaos had more paths to victory than he did, and he made plans for both outcomes. If he won at Terra, the Imperium would endure, and humanity would suffer for 10,000 years as a deliberate distraction. If Horus won, humanity would go extinct, but the extinction would be slow and agonizing enough to serve the same purpose. Either way, the Emperor ensured his species would be the shield. Either way, he damned humanity to buy time for everyone else. The Shadowseer shivers despite the library's constant temperature. That is not heroism. That is something colder than anything chaos has ever produced. I adjust my mask and feel the weight of 10,000 years pressing against my skull. Heroism is what we call sacrifice when we approve of the cause. The Emperor did not care if we approved. He cared if it worked. We stand together in silence, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of 100 dead civilizations. And I wonder if any of them faced a choice like the Emperor did. Did the old ones sacrifice themselves to create the younger races? Or was their extinction an accident? Did the civilization that built the Necrons understand they were creating monsters? Or did they think they were building tools? History is full of species that made terrible choices for what they thought were good reasons. And the Emperor's choice was just the most recent and most calculated. He looked at the trolley problem and decided the only answer was to throw his entire species under the wheels, to give everyone else time to get off the tracks. And it worked. Not perfectly, because nothing ever works perfectly, but enough. Humanity bought the galaxy 10,000 years, and no one knew, and no one would have believed it if they had known, because the idea that suffering could be strategic is too nihilistic for most species to accept. I leave the Black Library and return to the webway, and from there I begin the long journey back to the craft world I call home when I am not wandering. I have not decided yet whether to tell anyone what I found. The crystals are safe in the library, and the Shadowseers will decide among themselves whether the knowledge they contain should ever be released. My role is done. I am the messenger who delivered the message, and now I can return to being a solitaire, dancing the stories of the fall and the laughing God's tricks for audiences who laugh because they do not understand and weep because they do. But even as I walk through the webway's twisting paths, I know I am changed. I have looked at the gravestone of humanity and read what was written there, and I cannot unknow it. The silence of Terra will follow me for the rest of my existence, however long that lasts before she who thirsts finally claims me. The craft world I reach is Ulfway, the black-hulled giant that orbits closest to the Eye of Terra, the craft world that has lived in chaos's shadow for so long that its seers have forgotten what it means to look at a future without daemons in it. I arrive during the Festival of Mourning, when the Eldar gather to remember those lost to Slaanesh, and the irony is not lost on me. I am mourning too, but not for the Eldar. I am mourning for a species that died so mine could have a chance at survival, and they never even told us what they were doing. The festival is beautiful in the way Eldar gatherings always are, all flowing robes and antigrav dances and songs in languages so old they predate the fall itself. But underneath the beauty is desperation, because every Eldar knows we are dying. Our birth rates have collapsed to almost nothing. Our infinity circuits are failing faster than we can repair them. We are a species in managed decline, sliding toward extinction with the full knowledge that extinction is inevitable, and the only question is whether it happens in 1,000 years or 10,000. I watch the dancers and think about the Emperor's message. Humanity suffered so that others might not have to, but we are suffering anyway. The Eldar are dying, the Tau are fragmenting, the Necrons are succumbing to despair. The Orcs are thriving, but Orcs are not a civilization. They are a natural disaster with culture grafted on. What did humanity buy with their extinction if all of us are dying anyway? Just slower? And then I understand the final piece, the one the Emperor probably understood but did not bother to say because he knew no one would listen. Humanity did not buy us victory. They bought us time, and time is the only currency that matters when fighting inevitability. Every year we survive is another year we might find an answer. Every generation that lives is another chance for someone to discover the weapon or strategy or insane gambit that could turn the tide. The Emperor did not save the galaxy. He just made sure the galaxy would still exist long enough that someone else might. A farseer approaches me as I stand on the edge of the festival, watching but not participating. Her name is Eldrad Ulthran, and she is the oldest living Eldar psyker, older than most craftworlds, old enough to have been alive when the Imperium was still in its infancy. She looks at me with eyes that have seen too many futures and says, "You went to Terra." It is not a question. Farseers do not ask questions when they already know the answers. I nod, and she continues, "You found something there, something that disturbs you. I have seen it in the sky, a ripple in the possible futures that originates from a vault beneath glass and ends in the Black Library. I consider lying, but Eldrad has forgotten more about deception than I will ever learn, so I tell her the truth. I tell her everything. The crystals, the memories, the Emperor's message, the revelation that humanity's suffering was strategic, that the Imperium was designed to fail slowly, that every horrible aspect of human existence under the Emperor's rule was intentional, because it kept chaos focused on humanity instead of everyone else. Eldrad listens without interrupting, and her expression never changes, which is somehow more unnerving than if she had reacted with shock or horror or disbelief. When I finish, she stands silent for a long moment, and then she says something I do not expect. I knew. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? She gestures toward the festival, toward the dancers and singers and mourners. Not all of it, not the specifics, but I knew the Emperor had a plan that involved sacrificing his own species. I saw it in the skein during the Great Crusade, a future where humanity suffered terribly but the suffering served a purpose. I tried to warn the Cabal. I told them their prophecy was incomplete, that they were missing a variable in their calculations. They did not listen. They were so certain they had found the answer, so convinced their logic was flawless, that they dismissed my warnings as the paranoia of a species that had already fallen to chaos once. I feel something crack inside me, some last foundation of certainty giving way. If you knew, why did you not stop them? Why did you let the Cabal manipulate the Alpha Legion and engineer Horus's victory? Eldrad's eyes focus on something I cannot see, some distant point in space or time or possibility. Because I also saw the futures where Horus loses, where the Emperor survives and the Imperium endures for 10,000 years, and those futures are worse. Kysaduras, so much worse. In those futures, the Imperium becomes exactly what the Emperor designed it to be, a suffering engine so vast and terrible that it distorts the warp itself. Chaos grows fat on human agony, but the Imperium also grows, spreading across the galaxy like a cancer, consuming every other species it encounters. The Tau are wiped out before they leave their home system. The Necrons are destroyed before half their tomb worlds wake. The Eldar are hunted to extinction within 5,000 years. And chaos, bloated on human souls and human suffering, becomes powerful enough to breach the webway permanently and drag the entire galaxy into the warp. She turns to look at me directly, and I see something in her eyes I have never seen in a Farseer before. Regret. The Emperor's plan works, but only if humanity loses eventually. If the Imperium endures forever, it becomes the very thing it was designed to prevent. Horus's victory was not the Cabal's clever manipulation or Chaos's triumph. It was the Emperor's failsafe, the outcome he planned for in case his own civilization succeeded too well at surviving. He built the Imperium to fail, and when it looked like it might not fail fast enough, he ensured one of his own sons would have the tools and motivation to bring it down. Horus was not a traitor, he was a contingency. The words make a horrible kind of sense, and I hate that they do. I hate that the universe is so cruel that the only way to save it is to engineer the extinction of an entire species. I hate that the Emperor looked at every possible future and chose the one that involved the most suffering because it was the only one where anyone survived at all. And I hate that Eldrad knew and said nothing, because what could she say that would have changed anything? Does anyone else know? I ask, and she shakes her head. The Shadowseers in the Black Library suspect, but they do not have confirmation. The Cabal died millennia ago, killed by the very forces they thought they could manipulate. You and I are the only ones who understand the full picture, and we will remain the only ones if I have any say in the matter. She pauses, and her voice softens to something almost gentle. This knowledge is poison, Kysaduras. It will destroy anyone who learns it, because it makes every death and every moment of suffering into part of a grand design, and sentient beings cannot live with that level of cosmic horror. We need to believe that suffering is random, that cruelty is a failure of morality rather than a tool of survival. If the galaxy learns that the Emperor deliberately built hell to save everyone else, it will break the last remaining faith any species has in the possibility of a better future. I want to argue. I want to say that people deserve the truth, that hiding this knowledge is just another form of the same manipulation the Cabal practiced. But I look at the festival around us, at the Eldar singing songs of mourning and hope, and I realize Eldrad is right. These people are dying slowly, fighting a war they know they cannot win, holding on to the last shreds of their civilization, because the alternative is surrendering to she who thirsts. If they learn that humanity's extinction was engineered, that the Emperor sacrificed his entire species as a strategic gambit, it will destroy the narrative that keeps them going. The Eldar need to believe that survival is possible, that there is some path through the darkness that does not involve deliberately choosing annihilation. The truth would take that belief away, and without belief there is only despair, and despair is Nurgle's gateway. What do we do? I ask, because I genuinely do not know. Eldrad looks toward the Eye of Terra, that vast wound in reality visible even from inside the Craftworld's protective shell, and she says, "We endure. We survive. We honor humanity's sacrifice by making sure it was not in vain. The Emperor bought us 10,000 years. We have wasted most of that time fighting among ourselves and hiding in the webway, but there are still a few centuries left, maybe a few millennia if we are very lucky and very careful. Enough time to find a weapon or a strategy or a miracle. Enough time to make humanity's extinction mean something more than just a delaying action." She turns back to me, and for the first time since I have known her, she smiles. It is not a happy smile. It is the smile of someone who has accepted the impossible and decided to do it anyway. The Emperor gave us time. The least we can do is use it. I leave Ulthway that night, slipping back into the webway without saying goodbye to anyone else. I am a solitaire, and solitaires do not linger. We walk alone between the living and the damned, performing the stories of the Eldar's history so that others will remember, and now I have a new story to perform. Not the true story, because the true story is locked in the Black Library and will stay there until the heat death of the universe, but a story close enough to the truth that it will preserve the important parts. I will dance the tale of humanity's fall, of how they fought chaos for 10,000 years and lost, but their loss was not meaningless. I will perform the tragedy of the Emperor, a figure who saw the future and chose the darkest path because it was the only one that led anywhere but total annihilation. And I will end every performance with the solitaire's traditional gesture, a bow toward the audience that acknowledges we are all part of the same dance, all moving toward the same inevitable ending, and the only choice we have is whether we move with grace or stumble in the dark. The years blur together after that. I travel from Craftworld to Craftworld, from exile enclaves to webway sanctuaries, performing the story of humanity's fall in 1,000 different variations. Some audiences weep, some laugh, thinking it is fiction. Some walk away disturbed, sensing truth underneath the performance even if they cannot articulate what that truth is. And slowly, across decades and then centuries, the story spreads. It becomes part of the Eldar's collective memory, a cautionary tale about the price of survival and the danger of certainty. No one knows it is real. No one connects it to the crystals in the Black Library or the Emperor's actual plan. But the emotional truth survives, and that is enough. The Eldar begin to understand that humanity's suffering was not random, that the Imperium's cruelty served a purpose, even if that purpose was incomprehensible to those trapped inside it. And with that understanding comes a grudging respect, the kind of respect you give to someone who throws themselves on a grenade to save strangers. 3,000 years after my journey to Terra, I return. I do not know why. Perhaps it is sentiment, which is dangerous for a solitaire because sentiment leads to attachment, and attachment leads to Slanesh. Perhaps it is curiosity, a need to see if anything has changed. Or perhaps it is simply that Terra's silence calls to me the way Slanesh calls to all Eldar, irresistible and inevitable. The planet looks the same as it did before, glass and purple sky and the memory of 10 billion dead. But something is different. The silence is not as complete. There are sounds now, faint and distant, like whispers carried on a wind that does not exist. I follow the sounds to the ruins of the Imperial Palace, and what I find there makes me question everything I thought I understood about life and death and the nature of the warp. There are ghosts on Terra, not daemons, not warp entities, ghosts. The psychic echoes of humans who died here, impressions burned so deeply into reality by the trauma of their deaths that they persist even now, 10,000 years later. I see a custodian guard standing watch over a gate that no longer exists. I see a remembrancer sketching a scene of devastation with tools made of light. I see a child, no more than 6 years old, crying for a mother who will never come. The ghosts do not interact with each other or with me. They are recordings, moments of extreme emotion preserved like insects in amber, playing on endless repeat. And as I walk through them, as I see the last moments of humanity preserved in psychic aspic, I realize something that makes my chest tighten. The Emperor's plan failed, not strategically, because strategically it worked exactly as intended, but spiritually, cosmically, in the way that matters to beings who think about meaning instead of just survival, it failed completely. Humanity suffered. They died. They were erased from the galaxy, and all that remains are these ghosts, and the memories locked in crystals beneath the surface, and the galaxy is no better off. The Eldar are still dying. The Tau are still fracturing. Chaos is still growing, still spreading, still inevitable. Nothing changed except that one species is gone, and the rest of us are still here, marching toward the same ending at a slightly slower pace. The Emperor bought time, but time is not salvation. Time is just the space between now and annihilation. And if you do not use that space to find an answer, then all you have done is prolonged the suffering. I stand in the ruins where the Golden Throne once held the Emperor's dying body, and I feel the weight of cosmic futility pressing down on me like a physical thing. What was the point? What did any of it mean? And then I see something that changes everything one final time. Among the ghosts, standing near what used to be the Eternity Gate, there is a figure that is not a ghost. It is too solid, too present, too aware. It sees me, and its eyes are gold. I have seen many things in my long existence. I have walked through the Black Library's forbidden sections. I have danced in front of demons, and lived to tell the tale. I have looked into the eye of Terra and survived with my sanity intact, but I have never seen anything like this. The figure is human, or appears to be, wearing the armor of a custodian guard but without any of the decorations or personal heraldry that marked individuals, and the light coming from its eyes is not reflected light. It is emanating, the way the Emperor's light used to emanate before Horus killed him. The figure speaks, and its voice is the Emperor's voice, but smaller, diminished, as if I am hearing an echo of an echo. You came back. I wondered if anyone would. I cannot move, cannot think, cannot process what I am seeing because it is impossible. An impossibility is supposed to have rules, even in a galaxy where chaos exists. You are dead, I say, and my voice sounds distant even to me. The Emperor died 10,000 years ago. Horus killed you. The Imperium fell. The figure nods slowly. That body died, yes. But consciousness is not limited to flesh. The warp remembers everything, and I burned bright enough in the warp that fragments of me persist. I am not the Emperor. I am a shard, a splinter, a memory that became self-aware. There are others scattered across the former Imperium, ghosts of the man I once was, each one holding a different piece of what he knew and felt and planned. I am the piece that remained on Terra, anchored to the place where the dream died. It gestures toward the ruins around us. I have been here for 10,000 years, watching the ghosts replay their deaths, unable to intervene because I am not real enough to touch the material world. But I can speak, and I can remember, and I can tell you that you understand correctly. The plan worked. Humanity died slowly enough that chaos fed on us for a millennium, and that millennium gave the other species time to prepare. But preparation is not victory, and time is not salvation. I knew this. The Emperor knew this. We were never trying to save the galaxy. We were trying to give it a chance. The shard of the Emperor moves closer, and I can see through it slightly, as if it is made of colored glass. You found the crystals. You learned the truth. And now you are here, looking for meaning in the ruins, hoping to understand why any of this mattered. I will tell you. It mattered because choice matters. The galaxy faced a simple equation. Chaos wins immediately and devours everyone, or chaos wins slowly and some species have a chance to find a solution before the end. I chose the second option, and I paid the price with my species' collective suffering. Was it the right choice? There is no right choice when all options lead to annihilation. There is only the choice that postpones the ending long enough that someone, somewhere, might find a miracle. The shard pauses, and something like sadness crosses its translucent face. The Eldar will fall within 2,000 years. The Tau will fracture completely within 5,000. The Necrons will succumb to entropy cults within 8,000. And then chaos will own the galaxy entirely, and there will be nothing left but screaming and the laughter of thirsting gods. Humanity bought time, but time runs out eventually. That is the nature of time. I force myself to speak, even though every instinct tells me to run, to flee back to the webway and forget this conversation ever happened. Then what was the point? If everyone dies anyway, if chaos wins no matter what, why did humanity sacrifice themselves? Why not just surrender immediately and spare everyone the suffering? The shard's golden eyes brighten slightly, and when it speaks there is something almost like pride in its voice. Because surrender is not the same as defeat. Defeat is when you stop fighting. Surrender is when you choose to stop fighting. Humanity never surrendered. We fought until the last human fell, and then our ghosts kept fighting, burned into the fabric of reality by sheer refusal to accept that chaos deserved to win. And maybe that is the point. Maybe the meaning is not in the victory or the survival, but in the refusal. The universe is hostile to life and consciousness and meaning. Chaos is the natural state of existence, entropy in its most malicious form. Every moment of order, every fragment of civilization, every act of creation or kindness or hope is a rebellion against the fundamental nature of reality. Humanity rebelled, and we lost. But we rebelled beautifully, and we made chaos work for its victory. The shard begins to fade, its light dimming as if the energy required to manifest is finally running out. Go back to your people, Kysaduras the Wandering. Tell them what you learned, or do not tell them. It does not matter. What matters is that you keep fighting, keep refusing, keep rebelling against the darkness for as long as you can, because the rebellion itself is the meaning. There is no happy ending waiting at the finish line. There is only the choice to keep moving toward the line anyway, knowing it ends in oblivion, because the alternative is accepting oblivion now, and that is unacceptable. Humanity was the shield, yes, but not a shield that blocked the blow. A shield that said, you will have to go through us first, and we will make you regret every inch of ground you take. The shard is almost gone now, barely visible against the purple sky. You were the shield, and we never knew, I whisper, repeating the words I spoke the first time I stood on Terra's ruins. The shard's final words are so quiet, I almost miss them. You know now. That is enough. And then it is gone, and I am alone among the ghosts, and the silence of Terra returns. I stand there for a long time, trying to integrate what I have learned, trying to find some framework that can hold this much tragedy and still allow for hope. And slowly, as the ghost child continues crying for her mother and the ghost custodian continues standing watch, I understand. The Emperor's plan was not about victory. It was about defiance. He looked at an unwinnable war and chose to fight anyway, and he brought his entire species with him into the fire, and they burned bright enough that the light is still visible 10,000 years later. Humanity did not save the galaxy, but they proved that salvation was not the only thing worth dying for. Dignity matters. Defiance matters. The refusal to bow matters, even when bowing would be easier. even when the outcome is the same either way. I leave Terra for the final time and return to the webway, and from there I begin the longest journey of my existence. I travel to every craft world, every exile sanctuary, every hidden enclave where the Eldar still cling to life, and in each place I perform the story of humanity's fall, but I change the ending. Instead of tragedy alone, I add defiance. Instead of despair, I add dignity. I show the Emperor not as a failed tyrant, but as a martyr who chose damnation because it was the only choice that gave others a chance. I show humanity not as victims, but as warriors who knew they were doomed and fought anyway. And slowly, across centuries, the message spreads. The Eldar begin to fight differently, not with the desperation of a dying species trying to cling to survival, but with the determination of people who have decided that how you lose matters as much as whether you lose. The Tau hear the stories eventually, fragments carried by traders and spies and wanderers like me. Some of them reject it as propaganda, but others understand. The greater good begins to shift, incorporating the idea that purpose can exist without victory, that the struggle itself has meaning even if the outcome is predetermined. The Tau civil war does not end, but it transforms into something less bitter, less about winning, and more about ensuring that whoever survives carries forward the best aspects of what they were trying to build. Even the orcs, in their simple way, begin to change. They hear tales of humanity's final war, of how the humans fought with such determination that their ghosts still stand guard 10,000 years later, and the orcs decide that is the best fight they have ever heard of. They start seeking worthy opponents instead of just easy prey, looking for battles that will echo in eternity rather than battles that are over in an afternoon. It is a small change, barely noticeable, but it is something. And the Necrons, bitter and ancient and so very tired, they hear the story, and some of them weep. Not with tears, because they have no tears, but with the grinding of joints that have not moved in eons, and the slow dimming of eyes that have seen too much. They understand better than anyone what the Emperor did, because they made a similar choice millions of years ago when they accepted biotransference. They chose immortality over extinction, and they have regretted it every day since. The Emperor chose extinction over surrender, and some of the Necrons begin to wonder if he chose more wisely. A few tomb worlds simply shut down, their overlords deciding that eternal sleep is preferable to eternal war, but others wake with renewed purpose, not fighting to reclaim their empire, but fighting to ensure that when the galaxy finally dies, it dies with its eyes open and its fists clenched. 5,000 years after my second visit to Terra, I stand before the Council of Seers on Ulthwé, and I tell them everything. Every detail of the crystals, every word of the Emperor's message, every moment of my conversations with the Shard. I break the silence that Eldrad and I maintained for millennia, and I do it knowing the consequences. The Council is horrified, they are outraged, they are grieving and furious and terrified all at once. Some of them call for my exile. Some call for my death, even though killing a solitaire is nearly impossible and generally considered unlucky. But Eldrad, still alive after all these centuries, still the oldest Farseer in existence, she raises one hand and the room falls silent. Kysaduras is right to speak. We have hidden the truth for too long, and secrecy has not saved us. The Eldar are dying regardless. But if we face our ending with the knowledge of what humanity sacrificed, if we understand that suffering can be strategic and defiance can be meaningful even in defeat, then perhaps we die with more grace than we would have otherwise. The Council debates for 7 days and 7 nights, which is a short time for Eldar to reach consensus, but an eternity when your species is counting its years in centuries instead of millennia. And finally, they decide. The truth will be revealed, but carefully, slowly, woven into the mythology and stories of the Eldar, so that it becomes part of the cultural fabric, rather than a sudden shock. The Black Library will release the crystals to the Harlequins, and we will perform the true story of humanity's sacrifice across the galaxy. Not to change the outcome, because the outcome was set in motion 10,000 years ago and cannot be altered now, but to change how the living species face that outcome. The galaxy is ending. Chaos is winning. Everyone who is alive will eventually die, and their civilizations will crumble, and the stars themselves will go dark. But between now and then, there is space for meaning. There is room for defiance. There is time to prove that consciousness is not just an accident of chemistry, but a rebellion against entropy itself. I perform the final version of the story on every world I can reach. I dance it in front of Eldar who weep and Tau who debate and Necrons who stand motionless but somehow present. I perform it in the webway where the walls are thin and demons press against the boundaries, listening with hunger and something that might be respect. And once, just once, I perform it on a daemon world, where a greater daemon of Tsentia watches from a throne of impossible geometry. When I finish, the daemon speaks in a voice like breaking glass and says, "The Emperor was cleverer than we gave him credit for. He made you all into warriors instead of victims, and warriors are so much more entertaining to break." The demon gestures around at its palace of madness, but he was still wrong about one thing. He thought buying time would give you a chance to win. He did not understand that chaos does not have opponents. It has participants. Everyone who struggles against us is already playing our game, and the harder you fight, the more you feed us. Corn grows fat on your defiance. Tziench revels in your plans and desperate strategies. Nurgle treasures your despair when those strategies fail. And Slaanesh, oh Slaanesh, drinks deep of every moment of meaning and purpose you carve from the void, because meaning is just another excess, another indulgence, another way to feel something in an uncaring universe. The daemon leans forward, and its eyes are kaleidoscopes of possibility. But here is the beautiful secret, little Harlequin. We do not mind that, you know. We do not mind that you fight, because fighting is feeling, and feeling is food, and food is all we need. The Emperor gave us the greatest gift possible when he taught humanity to suffer with purpose. He elevated despair into an art form, and we will feast on that art forever. So dance your dances, tell your stories, make the galaxy's ending mean something. We will enjoy every moment of it. I leave that daemon world knowing the daemon was right. Chaos wins either way. Surrender feeds them, defiance feeds them. The only choice is which flavor of defeat you prefer. And I choose defiance, because it tastes less like ashes. Because even if the meaning is illusory, even if every act of rebellion is just another form of participation in chaos's game, there is still a difference between being devoured while screaming and being devoured while bowing. The Emperor understood that. Humanity lived it, and now the rest of us will too. 9,000 years after the fall of Terra, I stand in the ruins one final time. The purple sky has deepened to black, shot through with veins of crimson. The glass surface is cracked now in 1,000 places, and from those cracks seep the residue of the warp, translucent fluids that smell like copper and taste like fear. The ghosts are fading, their psychic energy finally depleting after so long. The custodian's outline is barely visible. The remembrancer's sketch is more suggestion than image. And the child has stopped crying, her form nothing more than a shimmer in the air. Terra is dying its second death, the final death, when even the memory of memory fades. Soon there will be nothing here but raw warp stuff and the laughter of demons. And that is acceptable. That is the natural order of things in a galaxy where chaos has won. I kneel on the glass and press my palm against the surface, feeling the coldness of it, the smoothness, the way it reflects my masked face back at me. And I whisper the words I have carried for 9,000 years, the prayer that is also a promise, the epitaph for a species that refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice. You were the shield, and we never knew. You suffered so we would not have to, and we suffered anyway. You died to buy us time, and we wasted the time, but the gesture mattered, the defiance mattered, the refusal to bow mattered. We will follow you into the dark, humanity. We will fight until the last Eldar falls and the last Tau surrenders and the last Necron finally rusts to dust. We will fight not because we can win, but because you taught us that losing with dignity is its own kind of victory. The Imperium was hell, but it was intentional hell, chosen hell, purposeful hell. And if we must build our own hells to keep chaos occupied for even one more generation, then we will do it. We will be the shield now, just as you were. We will burn bright enough that our light reaches across the void and shows others the way, not to salvation, because there is no salvation, but to meaning. And meaning is enough. It has to be enough. Because it is all we have left. The words fade into Terra's silence, and the silence does not answer, because silence never does. But somewhere in the warp, scattered across the galaxy in fragments too small to be called souls, but too persistent to fade entirely, the shards of the Emperor hear. And they remember. And they whisper to the darkness in a voice made of 10 billion human deaths. We chose this. We would choose it again. Tell them that. Tell them all that when chaos comes for them, as it inevitably will, they should not surrender. They should not bow. They should burn so bright that the gods themselves are blinded, even if only for a moment. Because that moment matters. That defiance matters. That is what consciousness is for. I rise from my kneeling position and turn away from Terra for the last time. The webway gate shimmers in the distance, and beyond it lies the remnant of the galaxy. The species still struggling, still fighting, still refusing despite the inevitability of their defeat. I will return to them. I will perform the story again and again until my voice gives out or she who thirsts finally claims me. And when I am gone, others will take up the tale. Because that is what the living do. We tell stories. We make meaning. We defy entropy for as long as we can, knowing that entropy will win eventually but refusing to make it easy. The Imperium of man was a nightmare civilization, brutal and oppressive and cruel beyond measure. But it was a nightmare with purpose, and purpose is the rarest and most precious thing in an uncaring universe. Humanity gave the galaxy 10,000 years. We are in the final centuries of those years now, watching the clock run down, hearing the footsteps of daemons in every shadow. But we are still here, still fighting, still refusing. And when the last light goes out and chaos claims the galaxy entirely, let it be said that we made them work for every inch. Let it be said that we learned from humanity's sacrifice and honored it by making our own. Let it be said that consciousness, brief and fragile as it was, burned bright enough to matter. The silence of Terra follows me into the webway, and I carry it like a banner, like a promise, like the last words of a dying species to those who will follow them into the dark. Fight, defy, refuse. Make your ending mean something, because meaning is all that separates us from the void, and the void can wait.